when we sit down and really think about it, the relationship between us and God is like nothing else. It's easy to fall into the trap of imagining God as this slightly more advanced version of us, someone just a few steps further down the path. But when we dive into the heart of scriptures like Deuteronomy, chapter 29, verse 29, and the book of Isaiah, chapter 55, verses 8 to 9, we're reminded that, honestly, we're not even playing the same game. God's on a whole other level, not just a better version of human understanding, but something else entirely. It's like comparing the infinite ocean to a drop of water. And that's not a bad thing. It's awe-inspiring. This vast difference, this gap between our understanding and God's, it's beautifully captured in those verses. They tell us straight up the secret things, the big mysteries of life and existence. They belong to the Lord, but it's not like we're left empty-handed. We've been given a treasure trove of revealed knowledge, wisdom that's meant to guide us, help us grow, and keep us connected to what truly matters. It's like being handed the most intricate and detailed map while being told there's even more beyond the edges of this paper. The thing is, God's thoughts and ways aren't just a little bit beyond us. They're as different from ours as the heavens are from the earth. Imagine trying to leap into the sky and touch the stars with your fingertips. That's the kind of difference we're talking about here. It puts things into perspective, doesn't it? Our greatest ideas, our most incredible inventions, our deepest philosophies, they're just the beginning. They're like building sandcastles on the shore when there's a whole ocean out there waiting to be explored. This doesn't mean we're to throw up our hands and give up on understanding or seeking knowledge. Far from it. It's an invitation, a call to humility and curiosity. It's like being a kid again, looking up at the night sky full of stars and realizing there's so much more to learn, so much more to discover. That's the adventure of faith. It's a journey into the vastness of God's wisdom and love, knowing we'll never reach the end, but relishing every step of the way. But here's where it gets really exciting. Despite this unfathomable gap, there's this incredible promise of closeness, of eventual understanding. Through grace, through this gift of salvation we've been talking about, there's this hope that one day we'll stand in God's presence, not just as creations marveling at their Creator from a distance, but as beloved children, fully able to bask in God's glory without fear or hesitation. It's like being promised a future where we can dive into the ocean instead of just playing in the sand. And while we're here, navigating the ups and downs of life, it's important to remember this. Our journey is about more than just waiting for what's next. It's about living fully in the light of God's love, embracing the grace that's been extended to us, and using the wisdom we've been given to navigate this world. It's about growing, learning, and preparing for the day when we'll finally see God face to face, not just as a spirit or a distant Lord, but as the very essence of love and truth that has guided us every step of the way. Now, stepping into this deeper understanding, it's like we're opening our eyes to a whole new dimension of who God is. It's tempting, really tempting, to picture God in our own image. After all, it's what we know best, right? We talk about God's hands, His eyes, or His voice, and it's easy to start imagining Him sitting on a cloud, looking down at us with a grandfatherly smile. But here's the thing. The Bible's use of these human-like terms, isn't about making God into a man. It's about bridging the vast, unimaginable gap between our limited human understanding and God's infinite nature. Think of it as the Bible speaking our language, using metaphors and symbols to give us a glimpse into something far beyond our comprehension. When we read about God's eyes or ears, it's not about physical features. It's about helping us understand that in a way that goes beyond our human senses. God sees and hears everything. It's a poetic way to say that nothing escapes God's notice, and that's both comforting and awe-inspiring. Diving deeper, the heart of this message reveals God as a spirit, not just any spirit, but a personal one that we can actually know and love, a concept that can be pretty mind-boggling. This isn't about knowing God in the same way you'd know a person, with a face and a name and a birthday. It's about knowing God on a spiritual level, connecting with the essence of who God is, beyond our physical world. It's about feeling God's presence in the depths of your soul, recognizing His work in your life and responding to His love. And this idea of God being a spirit, it changes everything about how we relate to Him. It's not about rituals or trying to impress some distant deity. It's about opening our hearts to a relationship that's incredibly personal. Imagine being so connected with God that you can call Him Abba, Father. That's not just formal respect. It's intimate, loving, and deeply personal. It's knowing that, no matter how far we might stray, we have a way back, a path to forgiveness and transformation. This transformation, it's not just about turning over a new leaf. It's about becoming a whole new creation. Suddenly, the things of this world, the stuff that used to matter so much, it starts to fade in comparison to the joy of knowing God. It's like finding the missing piece that makes everything else click into place. Your priorities shift, your desires change, and you find yourself consumed with a desire to know God more, to dive deeper into this relationship. Reflecting on figures like Moses, who had an extraordinary relationship with God, we get a glimpse of what's possible. Moses knew God in a way that few ever have, walking with Him, talking with Him, and seeing His glory firsthand. While we might not all be on a mountaintop having face-to-face conversations with God, Moses' relationship with Him shows us the depth of connection that's possible. It's a reminder that, no matter who we are, we can know God deeply and personally, each in our own unique way. Diving into these moments with Moses and the others, there's this incredible, almost tangible sense of awe and wonder. It's like standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon for the first time, where photos and stories just can't do justice to the experience. Moses, in his bold request, wants to see God's glory firsthand. And God, in His response, sets the scene for one of the most intimate and profound encounters in the Bible. It's as if God is saying, I want you to know me, but within the bounds of what you can handle. Now, imagine being Moses for a second. You're there, on the mountain, and God Himself tells you that you're going to experience His presence in a way no one else has. But with a catch, you can't actually see His face. It's a moment of mixed emotions. Exhilaration mixed with a bit of disappointment, perhaps. But then, there's this extraordinary act of care from God, placing Moses in the cleft of a rock, covering him with His hand. It's so personal, so protective. It's like God is ensuring Moses gets as close as possible without being overwhelmed. This whole scenario speaks volumes about God's understanding of our limitations. He knows exactly how much we can bear, and still goes out of his way to reveal as much of himself as he can to us. When Moses sees God's back, it's not about seeing a part of God's physical form. It's about God showing himself in a way that Moses can survive and understand. It's God bending down to our level, in a sense, to give us a glimpse of his glory. And then, when we loop in Isaiah, John, and Paul, we see this pattern emerge, a pattern of God revealing himself in powerful, life-changing ways, yet always with a consideration for the human condition. Isaiah sees the Lord high and lifted up, and it brings him to his knees, aware of his own unworthiness. John falls at Jesus' feet as though dead when he encounters the divine in a vision. Paul is knocked to the ground by the glory of God on the road to Damascus. Each experience is overwhelming. Each brings about a profound realization of God's holiness versus human sinfulness. What strikes me about these encounters is not just the fear or the awe, but the transformation that follows. It's not about being scared straight. It's about being invited into a deeper, more reverent relationship with God. These experiences change them at their core, reshaping their understanding of themselves and their place in relation to God. It's about realizing that even in our imperfection, we're loved and called to something greater. Reflecting on these stories, we're reminded that encountering God's glory is about more than seeing a vision or having a supernatural experience. It's about coming face to face with the reality of God's holiness, our own sinfulness, and the incredible grace that bridges that gap. It's a humbling reminder that while we may not see God's face in this life, we're still invited to know him, to love him, and to be transformed by him, just as Moses, Isaiah, John, and Paul were. In these stories, we find an invitation to approach God with a mix of boldness and humility, ready for whatever glimpse of his glory he might reveal to us. You know, when Paul talks about that mysterious journey to the third heaven in 2 Corinthians 12, it's like he's letting us in on a secret with a wink and a nudge, saying, I know a guy. This guy had an experience so out there. Paul himself is unsure if it was a body and soul trip or purely a spiritual one. He leaves us hanging with God knows, which is pretty much Paul's way of saying this experience was beyond human understanding. It's like he's hinting that sometimes the most profound spiritual experiences are the ones we can't neatly package into words or fully understand. And that's okay. Then we swing back to Moses in Exodus chapter 34, verses 29 to 30. Coming down from Mount Sinai, not realizing he's basically turned into a human flashlight. It's one thing to have a life-changing experience, but Moses' face glowing is on a whole other level. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the covenant law in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. Imagine that, chatting with God and walking away with a face so bright you need to wear a veil because it's scaring friends. It's as if Moses' face was screaming, I've seen things you wouldn't believe. And yet Moses, ever the humble guy, just goes about his business, unaware of his new, literal glow-up. This blending of awe, the mystery of divine encounters, and the humility of those who experience them deeply, really puts into perspective how transformative getting close to God can be. digging into this rich tapestry of understanding God, we're reminded of that striking verse in Isaiah chapter 55, verses 8 to 9, where God declares, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, says the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." It's like God is inviting us into this vast, expansive view of divinity, gently nudging us to acknowledge that whatever we think we know, there's infinitely more beyond it. It's a humbling reminder, but also incredibly freeing, knowing that we don't have to have God all figured out to be in a relationship with Him. Then there's Moses, right? His face literally shines after spending time with God on Mount Sinai. Exodus chapter 34, verses 29 to 30. It's as if the encounter with God was so powerful, so transformative, that it left a physical mark. Moses, walking down that mountain, wasn't just carrying stone tablets. He was a living testament to the presence of God. And the people's reaction? They were afraid. Moses' radiant face was too much for them. A vivid, shining reminder that the God they were dealing with was no small deal. But let's not forget the New Testament, where Jesus comes into the picture, embodying this profound connection between God and humanity. The book of John, chapter 1, verse 14, puts it beautifully. "The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us. We have seen His glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." In Jesus, the abstract becomes concrete. The unseen is seen, and the untouchable becomes touchable. God's love isn't just a concept. It walked around in sandals on the dusty roads of Galilee. This idea that God desires a relationship with us, despite our limitations, is just mind-blowing. It's not about us reaching up to grasp the infinite. It's about the infinite bending down to our level, making the first move towards us. Through Jesus, we see the lengths to which God will go to bridge the gap, a gap we could never close on our own. It's a story of love so deep, so wide, that it crosses every boundary between the divine and the human. And yet, despite this incredible closeness we can experience through Christ, we're still talking about the God who spoke the universe into existence, whose thoughts and ways are as unfathomable as the distance between the stars. It's this balance, this tension between the knowable and the unknowable, that makes our journey of faith so rich and mysterious. We're invited to know God personally, but also to worship God in awe of the mystery that we will never fully comprehend. Embarking on this journey to know God isn't like flipping through a photo album of someone else's vacation, where you're just a bystander to all the experiences. No, it's more like you're stepping into your own adventure story, where every page turn brings you closer to the heart of God. It's as if Paul's words in Philippians chapter 3, verse 10 invite us onto this path, not just as observers, but as participants, eager to dive into the depths of what it means to really live in communion with God. This isn't about ticking off spiritual milestones. It's about letting each step, each moment of understanding or confusion, draw us deeper into God's embrace. As we journey, we find that knowing God changes everything. Suddenly, the old labels we used to identify ourselves, our successes, our failures, or even the roles we play in our daily lives, start to fade into the background. In their place, a new identity emerges, one that's rooted in something, or rather, someone much bigger than ourselves. It's like looking in the mirror and realizing you're not just looking back at yourself, but reflecting a bit of God's love and grace too. And that realization, it's life-changing. It shifts how we see others, treating them not as mere extras in our story, but as fellow travelers, each with their own unique relationship with God. This transformative journey isn't just a nice idea tucked away in the pages of Scripture. It's the heartbeat of the Christian experience. It's about discovering that God isn't some far-off deity watching us from a distance, but a close, personal being who wants to walk through life with us. And as we walk with Him, we find that the path isn't always clear or easy, but in those moments of uncertainty or struggle, we learn that knowing God deeply isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting Him to guide us, step by step, through every chapter of our lives. It's a journey full of mystery and majesty. And honestly, there's no adventure I'd rather be on. So, as we walk this path of faith, let's embrace both the intimacy and the mystery. Let's remember that while we may catch glimpses of God's glory, like Moses, or be touched by His presence, like the disciples with Jesus, there's always more. Our understanding will always be partial, our vision limited, but that's okay. Because at the heart of our faith is a relationship with a God who is both beyond us and with us. A God whose love bridges every gap, whose grace covers every shortfall. And that, my friends, is a beautiful thing to ponder and cherish.